The information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the Gold Money Podcast with Alistair McLeod, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
And what I'd like to do now, Jim, is move on to gold, which I know is very much your expertise. And I've got in front of me an article you wrote very, very recently, and it's full of fascinating headlines. The battle is on for delivery and verification for official gold accounts. Evidence grows that much of it is gone, and when demanded, will be replaced with urgency. It's soon to transform into a global gold war, and so on and so on and so on. And of course, you then go on to the German government situation. Haven't we got a fascinating situation building? Because the central banks, I think the people who are very close to the market are aware that the central banks have far less gold than they actually say. And by the central banks, I mean the signatories to the Washington Agreement, if you like, in general terms. They got far less gold than they say, and yet there is pressure in places like Germany to account for the Bundesbank's gold. And of course, it's all sort of stuck in sight accounts or whatever accounts. It's been loaned and so on and so forth. So the gold's gone. What are the Germans going to do? How are the Bundesbank going to deal with this one? Isn't this a fascinating situation building up here?
Well, we've gone from what I call the global monetary war. We're moving into now the global gold war. They'd like to call it the global financial crisis that hit when Lehman was destroyed. Lehman was killed. It didn't fail. It was killed. It was killed to create some black holes and some opportunities. They were the least favored among the Wall Street brethren. They were also most heavily involved in mortgage bonds. Now, what you've got now is the gold market is like this fortress where the central banks are trying to defend their fortress. And you can come up with these arguments that all four walls are being attacked. Well, the trouble is there are more than four sides where the central banks are being attacked. It is every conceivable aspect of central bank franchise system and monetary policy is being attacked. I don't need to go into each one isolated to list them right now, but you mentioned the German. The Germans are walking a tightrope. There are two types of camps. There are two camps in Germany. There's an entire camp that's never in the news, and they're building pipelines and railways with Russia. They're never in the news. We got high-speed rail starting in Russia somewhere. Some of them, not too much. It's not on the other side of the Urals. All right, it's not Siberia. But these high-speed railways are designed for commerce and delivery of product and raw product as well, commodity product. They're all end in Germany. Why are they never in the news? All right. Apart from that, there's a tremendous effort going on where China, Russia, and Germany are building up right now an alternative payment system for dollar-based trade. They don't want it anymore. It's not going to work anymore. It's being phased out. They're going to be replacing it. It's coming. It's almost ready. It is. I hear in some circles that it is ready, and what they're waiting for is a complete breakdown in the dollar-based banking and trade system. And as this comes, it's going to be gold-based. There are some trade notes that are involved in this new system. It's not being used right now. But for all we know, some of the deals going on with China and India and Iran and other larger trade partners might have a little bit more sophistication than just simple gold bars being traded and just simple barter system based on a yuan renminbi account. All right, the Germans are key. The Germans are the consultants for this Eastern Alliance and replacement for the trade-based system, to replace it with a multilateral, multi-platform, not single bank SWIFT. Okay, this is very important. The current system right now for trade settlement is dollar-based through banks, through SWIFT transfers. Okay, well, that's very concentrated, like with 3 or 4 tunnels, major tunnels in the world. It's going to be replaced by a multilateral, multi-node, hundreds and thousands of nodes for payments that are not necessarily going to use at all the banks. It's going to be peer-to-peer. Germany is the architect of this. They're never in the news. But I'd like to focus a little bit more on the fact, on a new factor. And this is the gold standard being talked about more and more. I mean, you even have Deutsche Bank discussing the gold standard. This is very new. It's almost revolutionary. You have Steve Forbes in the United States talking about the gold standard. You've got PIMCO's Bill Gross not talking directly about it, but hinting about a gold standard, calling gold the viable asset to survive the firestorm. Okay, well, that's kind of saying we need the gold as a standard because it doesn't burn in fires. All right. There's a lot going on, Alistair. I mean, so many different aspects. But you know what really makes the gold market on fire is 2 big things: the 0% and the unlimited bond monetization. You just can't get away from that. It's global Weimar. That is the fuel for the gold market.
Absolutely. No, I go along with that. I'm fascinated in your take on Germany's involvement with Russia and China, because I have written several articles on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the vehicle whereby China and Russia and virtually the whole of Asia are cooperating with each other for the purposes of cross-border trade. And I've been convinced that the accumulation of gold by virtually all the members and all the future members has something to do with what you were talking about. But I hadn't made the link that Germany may well be involved. And I think, but what you say does make sense, I think on 2 levels. Firstly, Iran got stuffed by being frozen out of dollar settlements and then being frozen out of SWIFT. And the second thing is that I do know that Germany's trade with Russia and China has made those markets considerably more important for Germany than just the Eurozone, which, of course, throws up another interesting debate, which honestly, I wish we had time to discuss. But if we can move on a bit, how do you see the flows of gold? I mean, we've referred to gold, sort of being, if you like, involved with settlements on the Asian continent, the Euro-Asian continent. Do you see that, gold is sort of flowing from the west to the east? I mean, what's your take on that? Because if it is doing that, then there's got to be a huge wealth transfer effect. Particularly if the price of gold continues to rise.
Oh, there is a staggering flow of wealth from west to east. It's largely going from London to China. That's the bulk of it, but that's not all of it. I've got a source. He's a European with 30 years of gold trading experience, and he's got numerous billionaire clients. And he approached me in 2008, and it took me off guard. But he said, Jim, you're one of the few North American-based economic and financial gold analysts who has any idea what's going on, and I want to maintain communication with you. All right, well, we have for over 4 years, and I feel very fortunate to have his information flow. Well, he started telling me in March, April, and May about enormous transactions handled off-market against the London banks for satisfying margin calls. And I'd ask, well, it's the nature of the trades, and they're all leveraged, I assume. He said, oh, yes, they're all leveraged. They've got tremendous amounts of margin at stake, and they need to post more margin, and it's got to be gold. And I said, well, what kind of trades are these? He said, well, they're sovereign bonds from Southern Europe, but they're also currency, a lot dominated by the euro. But the big London banks are all negative on their trades. They're underwater. They're on margin calls. And he said what's happening is leverage is being used off-market exchange in transactions where the Eastern entities, think of them as Chinese billionaires and huge entities like old families, They've got their Rockefellers too. I mean, people need to wake up. China is not just this nation that's awakening after 100 years of slumber. No, it's a 1,000-year-old nation that took a nap for a century. They've got all these billionaire, trillionaire families, and now they're waking up, and they don't like what they're seeing out of London. So this, I call my contact the voice, Mein Herr, but he talked about how in this spring, 5,000 metric tons were shipped out of London, and he was part of some of it. He saw it. His colleagues saw it. His other people that he is in contact with, not necessarily in his firm. And it was 5,000 metric tons went from London basically to China between March 1st and mid-June. And I asked him at the end of July, another 1,000 metric tons? He said, about that. So it's 6,000 metric tons.
I didn't know those. I mean, apart from allegedly in the central banks. I mean, where is all this coming from? Because, I mean, it just doesn't exist, does it?
Oh, it surely does. It's draining the Bank of England. And the backstop is the Bank for International Settlements out of Basel, Switzerland. And I think there's a third backstop. I call them the Roman catacombs. And there's a religious organization in Rome. I don't like talking about them much, but they begin with a V. V is in victory. So you got London Deep Source, you've got the Swiss BIS, and you got the Roman catacombs. That's where it's coming from.
Right. So, yeah, well, I mean, there can't be much of it left because I go back to, I mean, there's work which our own James Turk has done and Frank Venerosa and so on, and they've concluded independently, and it's not just them, but others as well have, I think Reg Howe was another one, have concluded independently that anything between, 17,000 tons of gold by the early stage of this decade had gone from the central banks, who I would broadly define as the signatories to the Washington Agreement. So, I mean, it's not 32,000 tons falling down to a figure like, sort of 17,000 tons. It's 22,000 tons take off 15 or 17,000 tons. So there can only be about 5 or 7,000 tons left. So, I just wonder, they haven't got this quantity to deliver. And, I mean, okay, you can always find some gold in that sort of quantity, I suppose, if you rob Peter to pay Paul. But this must leave the situation in the market, the underlying situation, incredibly tight, doesn't it? I mean, is that what you're telling me?
Oh, it's incredibly tight. But when you talk about where's the source coming from, I mentioned London, I mentioned Switzerland, and I mentioned Rome. There's more. It's raiding the allocated accounts. And the German official account is one of them. And so are all the other various official accounts. I mean, you mentioned the SCO, the Shanghai Co-op Org. Well, that's a very real entity, and they're kind of like a small brain trust behind this Eastern Alliance that's forming. They advised Chavez in Venezuela to take back their gold from London.
Right.
They advised Iran to start settling with India in gold. You got all these different sources, but I must come back to the allocated gold because it's going to be the next enormous scandal that's going to eclipse the LIBOR. I mentioned London, Switzerland, and Rome as the backstop sources for gold supply. Yes, there's tremendous scurrying about. I mean, the United States is now setting new records for export of gold, and it's going to London, Switzerland, and Hong Kong. To London and Switzerland to help backstop all the demands, but to Hong Kong to satisfy Chinese basic demand. Okay, the allocated gold is this other giant pool of basically stolen gold. I don't like the term rehypothecated. I don't like the term taken but replaced with gold certificates. I mean, if you've got a diamond necklace sitting in a wall safe in your office and it's stolen and a little note is put on there, this is Jack Frost, thanks for the necklace. I don't call that a certificate that has value. That's kind of like an in-your-face message that you just got robbed. The allocated gold scandal is coming because I am being told that at least 20,000 metric tons and perhaps over 40,000 metric tons of allocated gold, not just government gold like Germany's. I'm talking about hundreds of very wealthy families who call up their gold banker and say, hey, Jives, can you tell me, is my gold safe, old man? Well, yes, no need to come down. You have my word.
Don't look at it, yes.
And in New York, they got the same thing. You know, hey, Stanley, my family's a little concerned about $100 million in gold. We've been banking with you folks for 35 years. Can you give me your word? Oh, yes, no need to come down. It's all here, I assure you. Yeah. It's not. It's been taken. Well, and MF Global is one of your other symptoms. For those who are looking to demand gold through futures contracts, be careful. You're going to get robbed before you get at the window. You had 140,000 clients. I've got one hat-trick letter client who was robbed as part of MF Global. He had an account. He liked to trade in agricultural products. He's based in Chicago. He told me repeatedly, there has been no settlement. The news of partial redemption is all a lie. I don't know anybody in MF Global with accounts who's gotten one nickel.
Yes, that is an absolute scandal, the whole thing. I mean, it's just incredible.
Well, it helps to be friends with the president, doesn't it?
Yes, I don't think I can comment on that, but I must admit the circumstantial evidence suggests that your comment is absolutely correct.
Well, John Corzine was a major fundraiser through Goldman Sachs and other different agencies and entities, and it's pretty plain. And I just love how with the MF Global thefts, they changed the law for bankruptcy. MF Global was a brokerage firm. It was not a financial firm. Therefore, the private accounts were not only segregated, but first in subordination, not last. I point to, I don't hear any other authors talking about the fascist business model, Alistair. I don't hear any other authors talking about the fascist business model. This is ingrained, institutionalized crime at the highest levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just, one last subject. We haven't mentioned silver at all. Now, silver, I think, is a very interesting subject because, it's volatile. It's more volatile than gold. If gold is, if we've got this short position in gold building up, then, my goodness, I would have thought that the price of silver, when gold moves, will go off like a rocket. I mean, how are you seeing silver, and what are you seeing in terms of flows of silver? What's the position in the market, do you think?
Well, I agree with your basic statement that when gold takes off, silver will go off like a rocket. I have this rule of thumb. I tell my clients I'd overweight in silver because if gold goes up a certain percent, silver's going to go up triple that. And we saw that happen in 2010. We saw it very clearly. Right now, there's something extremely weird going on. Huge amounts of silver are going from the U.S. East Coast facility. It's largely New York, but there's some suspicions that it might be Scotia Makota as well, which is Canada. So the U.S. and Canada, the New York and Canadian bullion banks are shipping enormous amounts of silver to London every single month. And it's catching attention. It's raising questions about Scotia Makota, as I said. And you must conclude, therefore, that London at the LBMA is having some real serious pressures to avoid a default. And recall as background that the MF Global client account thefts, it's all stolen. It's not missing. It's stolen. It was all to prevent the silver market from defaulting. So silver is the Achilles heel of precious metals. It's not platinum and it's not gold. Silver has been in deficit now for, I think, since about 2006 or 2007. In the United States, Teddy Roosevelt. He's the president back in 1905 and 1910. He's the president, the other Roosevelt, the one that I respect. I don't respect Franklin at all. Franklin was a very weak kind of socialist clown. But Teddy Roosevelt was responsible for the Panama Canal, which is another entire story in itself, purchased from the nation of Colombia. But, pardon me, but Teddy Roosevelt saw the strategic importance way back in 1910 of silver, and he built a stockpile of 6 billion, with a B as in boy, 6 billion ounces of silver. In 2003, 4, and 5, right around that time period, the silver turned into deficit for the U.S. So all the coin demand, which is going off the charts in the U.S., Canada, China, Australia, Europe, London, I hear there's some severe shortages of sovereign coins now, the minted coins out of London. It coincides with the big shortages in New York. They're big problems. I think that when this precious metals turns into a default event, it's not going to be over gold. It's going to be over silver.
Yeah. And
silver's going to jump $20 on a single day.
Yes, it's a fascinating story, and the other aspect of it, which I find fascinating, is China's role in this, because China, it seems to me, is a big user of silver because they are the largest manufacturers of solar panels and that sort of stuff. And I think I'm right in saying that they're probably the largest processors and refiners of silver. I mean, I can't get any statistics on this, but that actually gives them an ability to feed the market and control the price. Do you think that's happening, or am I off beam on that one?
No, I think that's probably true, and I agree fully that their refineries are probably the with the highest volume in the world. But unfortunately, they keep all the statistics dark. Let me provide some piece of information regarding Russia and China regarding their gold and silver accumulation. We get these official statistics like, the People's Bank of China added 1,000 tons, or up to 1,000 tons in official gold holdings. Well, let's get based in reality, if you don't mind. Multiply that by 8 to 10.
Yeah,
They've
absolutely.
got between 8,000 and 10,000. They've got more than Fort Knox had before it was ravaged and ransacked.
Well, we know that they are the largest miners of gold now, and the idea that the statistics bear any relation to reality, of course, just is absolute nonsense, because they haven't updated their central bank statistics since, I think I'm right in saying, in 2009, and yet no gold has left China. I mean, all their production, and we don't know how much they produce. They say they produce 300 and whatever tons it is, but it could be more, it could be less. I don't know. I should think it's probably more if it's not the exact figure. In which case, you're right. They are accumulating gold, and they're just not reflecting it in the accounts.
Well, that's true, and as I said, just multiply everything by 8 or 10 on their official gold, and as for output of gold and silver, just probably double it, because they're not going to play our game. They're not going to be honest when the United States is not honest. They're not going to say what their real official gold holdings are in China when they know Fort Knox is empty and the United States is lying. The United States talks about their deep storage gold. Earth to investors. There's nothing in Fort Knox. I've got a client who has a professional friend. He said, I've known him, Jim. I've known him for almost 20 years. He used to be involved with me in Chicago commodity delivery, but now he's moved on to a different career. He's in charge of some security forces, and he has the contract with his friends, his colleagues, for Fort Knox. And I said, yeah, well, what does Fort Knox have in it besides spiders and insects and maybe some rodents? And he said, nerve gas. Fort Knox has no gold. It is a nerve gas storage center, well guarded. The people of Kentucky are the first ones to understand Fort Knox has nothing, because for a full year and a half or 2 years during the Clinton administration, trucks went out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you look closely at the trucks, you'd see that they're riding high as they arrive to Fort Knox, and they ride low, way down as they leave Fort Knox.
Where was it all going?
I believe that the big London and New York investment banks that are heavily short in gold and silver, I have been told by my source, and also Jim Sinclair has been very clear about this, the private accounts of Wall Street and London executives are loaded with gold and silver investments. So they're using their company to short and their private accounts to go long. They're hoping to be the lords of the world in the next chapter. You know, I'd like to make a point. We were talking about China and supply. We should not get away from South Africa and all their strikes. If you want to talk about supply, you got to talk about the biggest trouble zones in the world. And that's, number one is South Africa. And number two is certain South American locations like Bolivia. These are not areas where gold is going to continue in its output. They're all in decline due to labor strikes. And you got to think, well, why are the labor strikes hitting now? It's because the laborers are seeing a higher cost of living from QE in the major central banks. This is a vicious circle that works in the favor of gold to reduce its supply because the workers are suffering from central bank policy with 0% and unlimited bond purchases in QE. That is unbelievable irony.
Indeed. Well, Jim, I've taken an awful lot of your time, and it's been fascinating. I could go on and on and on and on, but I'd like to thank you very, very much indeed for taking time out. Now, your websites, you write the Hat Trick Letter, and your own site, I think, is goldenjackass.com. Where do our listeners find you? Because I think that from this, that a lot of them will be very, very interested to begin to follow you. And I think you've got you have a paid subscription service as well, don't you?
Yes, the Hat Trick Letter is a paid subscription service. A lot of the web journals, like Market Oracle and Gold Eagle and Gold Seek and a few others, they post the name of Hat Trick Letter, but the articles that you see for free are what I call shameless promotional pieces to secure more paid subscribers. The product that I sell is the Hat Trick Letter.
Right.
It is located on goldenjackass.com. I mean, I know it's a little bit of a crazy name, but my mother called me a jackass all through my young years because I was both bright and insolent. I was a disobedient little boy. I got in trouble in school. I was near the best in the class in school, but I was also a discipline problem. So I was always the jackass. Will you come down for dinner, you jackass? I was busy doing something, solving a puzzle or working on a bicycle. Anyway, so the Golden Jackass, www.goldenjackass.com is the website. I hit my 100-month mark. It's up to 104 now, 104 months, so a little over 8 years, 8.5 years. That the Hat Trick Letter has been in existence. All those articles you see out there are free, but if you go to the website, you can sign up because I leave out quite a lot, Alistair. I mean, I'm not kidding. I post some rather meaty public promotional articles that are for free in what we call the public domain. They've got a bit of substance to them, and some people say, Jim, you're putting a little too much in those. They're free. I said, yeah, I know, but the business has been built to such a point now, and I'm very happy with that. I'm going to go over a little bit too much and give it a public service aspect. I've got two reports. I call it the Money War Report and the Golden Currency Report. I changed the macroeconomic report about 2.5 years ago because all the big mega forecasts came true. The housing market in the U.S. went bust. The banking sector went insolvent. The war remained continuous and endless to wreck the deficits. The U.S. government got its $1 trillion chronic deficit, and it's stuck. All right, all these things are correct mega forecasts, so there's no need to forecast that the housing market is going to go bust, or the banking system is going to go insolvent, or the U.S. government is going to go, chronically in deficit when it's stuck in place. So I changed the name of the macroeconomic report to the monetary war report, and that's what we've got. You have terms like the competing currency war. Well, that's part and parcel of the money wars. I think there's a global monetary war going on right now to defend the dollar, to defend the fiat currencies, and to defend the corrupt syndicates that operate those currencies.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. Well, that's great. Anyway, so on behalf of Gold Money, I'd like to say thank you very much indeed. I found that absolutely fascinating. Perhaps we might have you back at a later time.
Jolly good.
Thanks again.
Subscribe to the Gold Money newsletter at www.goldmoney.com to receive email updates on new articles, videos, and iTunes podcasts from our Gold Research section.